Arc of the plot. Generally speaking, whichever plot type you use, it will pass through roughly 8 stages. These are status quo. This is sometimes referred to as baseline. Perhaps not much is happening in the life of our protagonist, or conflict may be rife. Whether there is stillness or mayhem, it's the normal, how every day is in the world of our character. For example, if you were writing about a college professor who had a pretty quiet life in a world of books, some teaching, and lots of reflective thinking, then when you open the story, you can set the scene in that way. There isn't much conflict in her life, but that's the normal. If, however, you were writing about a slum dweller living on the streets of Delhi, then there is literally chaos around them every day as they try and scrimp and scrape so they can eat. There is plenty of conflict, but that's the normal for them. Then we have the trigger. This is the second stage. Something happens outside of the control of the protagonist, the hero or the heroine, and their world is turned upside down. A normal day becomes a remarkable one. The actual trigger event could be something small and innocuous or huge and distasteful. It may not even be recognized as anything significant at that moment. However, the trigger will lead to their world changing completely, either now or in the future. Perhaps the college professor in her research uncovers a sinister murder which took place in the past and which was undertaken by the current mayor of the city. She reports it to the police, but doesn't realize the police department had been paid off by the mayor, who then sends a hitman after her. Or our slum dweller finds a secret treasure box of gold from the time of the Mughal Empire in India. The local crime boss gets to hear about this and sends his hoods after our hero. The next stage then is search. The impact of the trigger is to propel the protagonist on a search to restore balance in their life. For example, the college professor wants to go back to a quiet, erudite life of a scholar. Or our Delhi slum dweller wants to be able to use some of the gold he's found to lift himself and his family out of poverty, but isn't able to do so without upsetting the local crime boss. Obstacles. As the character is sent off on their search, they'll encounter obstacles or barriers and impediments along the way, which stop them from restoring balance to their life. Generally, these will be unpleasant obstacles, but occasionally they might be pleasant. Whether onerous or easy, the obstacle must move the story forward in some way. The obstacles also need to be something unexpected. In other words, the reader should not be able to spot them in advance. Perhaps our college professor escapes the clutches of the hitman and then goes to the dean of her department, only to find he's also in on the conspiracy. At the same time, the obstacle must be plausible. For example, we can't suddenly have a space-time shift appearing in our slum in Delhi and our main protagonist stepping through it with his family and living happily ever after in the future. Ideally, you want the reader to reach the end of the story and then look back at it and think, yes, I should have spotted that. The author did leave some clues, but I didn't pull them together at the time. Choices. The protagonist will need to make some critical choices as they face each obstacle. What am I going to do now? They ask themselves. As the story develops, the choices they face must get tougher and tougher. How they respond will be a reflection of the character you've developed. Will they be rash and impulsive, or calm and cool under pressure? The college professor needs to make a choice. Will she run for the hills or stay in the city and fight it out? The slum dweller needs to make a choice. Should he just go over and hand the gold to the local crime boss who is threatening his family? Or do you try and get them out of Delhi to the apparent safety of the countryside? Climax. The critical choices which the protagonist makes will culminate in a climax. This should be when the hero or heroine is put into a really tight spot. They're character tested and they undergo some form of transformation as they try and get out of it. The climax doesn't need to be spectacular, but it must be significant to the life of the protagonist. Reversal. The climax should result in some form of reversal, where there is a change from the start of the story. The reversal is not a standalone event, but it's the culmination of everything which has gone before. For example, in The Lord of the Rings, the hobbits return to their beloved Shire, but they are changed as a result of their search, the obstacles they encountered, the choices they made, and the climax of destroying the Ring of Power. Perhaps in our fictional story, the college professor returns to her tenured role, but now she's become a vocal advocate in the fight against corruption, so her life isn't as sleepy as it was before, nor is she as naive. Or our slum dweller returns back to his slum and with his newfound wealth builds better homes and sanitation for all the people living there. Resolution. The resolution is in many ways the new status quo, with the protagonist having been transformed from their experience.